This is Steven Sadian, aka Rinse Dream, the man who co-wrote, produced, directed, and designed the movie we're about to watch, Cafe Flesh. It was my second feature film after Night Dreams, which also starred Andy Nichols, who was the opening credit title, who plays Max in the movie. And these are the title sequence, most of which are all pseudonyms. That's Cindy Katz, who was a longtime Hollywood editor. Mitchell Froom, the great composer, who created this wonderful score. That's Mark Esposito, who was my right-hand man while making the film. And that's Paul Berthel, who was not the production designer, but was the prop maker who did all of the props on the film. And of course, that's Jerry Stahl, Herbert W. Day, FX Pope is Francis D'Elia, my partner at the time, and that's me. Paul, who is the credited production designer, was an inventive prop maker and worked so hard on the film. Couldn't have made it without him, and that's the reason I let him have that title, which is really mine, but I thought he was deserving of an extra special mention. Also, Polyester, who was the costume designer, was my former wife, and she designed all of the costumes for all of my work, both print and film. What you're reading now was the first thing we wrote before anything on the script was written. The premise, I told Jerry the premise of the film, when I had this idea, and based on my concept, Jerry wrote this introduction. And it was read by a great Foley artist, a woman who specialized in doing Foley and voiceovers, and I had her come in and not only read the intro, but she did all the sound effects in the film of panting and all the erotic scenes. She was the main voice throughout. Of course, this is Andy as Max. I go back with Andy when we were teenagers, and he was in my first film, Night Dreams, and it was written specifically for him, the part. Sometimes I look back on this sequence, this opening. I love the opening of an adult film, because you have to remember, at the time, this was financed by a pornographic company. It was intended to be released as a porn movie. Stories, it has so many tales of its origin. But the fact is, I got financing from a basic company that financed a lot of 35 millimeter pornography. And Night Dreams, my first film, was the same company. That film did well enough where they said I could make another film. I don't think they ever expected I was going to make this film exactly. I don't think they read the script, but they trusted me. All these extras were, the casting of all of these extras was really great. I actually had a casting director, and this is the woman you're looking at now. She was the casting director. She had started a little company with all punk rockers and all specialty personalities and types. And after she did Cafe Flesh and did the casting, she really got a lot of calls, and she was casting a lot of major films. Her name was Janet Cunningham. And she was the go-to person during the era of rock videos. You needed a strange face or extras, and even majors. She did very well with this. This sequence was when I created the idea of these tableaus. I wanted to do send-ups of a lot of cliches that came out of porn. And this is obviously is the milkman who comes to the house, and then is a sex with the desperate housewife. You know, the pizza delivery boy is the cliche. Now these guys, it's funny, all three work on the crew. On the far left was the makeup and costume stylist. The man in the middle was an electrician, and on the far right was the head makeup, hair and makeup actually. And I said they would all be able to work. They had the right faces and vibe and personalities where they would jump in and be able to understand it. This was really the whole 1970s, straight out of a health book or something. That's the whole premise. Now the woman here, she had never made an adult film. That was not even, this was her first one. She was, I think, going to UCLA, and she did it. I paid pretty well for these scenes, and she just needed the money, and why not? I don't know if she ever did another film. And now you have to remember, when I did this film, my instructions to all of the actors and actresses was I didn't want an erotic film. I said you could, I wanted to make an anti-erotic film. That was the idea, which I didn't go around saying that too loudly, but that was my intention. And the babies in the background, I took right from The Bandwagon, the great Minnelli film, I think from '57, MGM. It had Fred Astaire and Annette Fabray and Oscar Levant in baby drag, and I always loved it from when I was a kid. I loved the Arthur Freed musicals out of MGM, and I said I'm going to, in Cafe Flesh, I'm going to do a few tributes to The Bandwagon, which is really one of my 2 or 3 very favorite musicals. Now, the sex scenes also, from the very beginning, I wasn't going to have much foreplay. I was going to do the pantomime, basic little choreography, and then I wanted to go straight to the penetration shots, which is probably the worst idea on paper you can imagine. But there was a method to the madness, or a madness to the method. Yeah, sometimes when I reflect on my decision to purposely not have erotic scenes, I got a lot of feedback about that, especially from the people who financed it. But, I actually said if you were being forced to do it, well, maybe it's just perfunctory, just a job. So it should be, very matter of fact. But I earned a reputation from Night Dreams and then Cafe Flesh as, Stephen, can't you ever make anything erotic? And eventually later on, just to prove that I could actually make something sexually appealing, I did a film called Party Doll A Go-Go, which was my answer to that question. But then again, I never thought of myself as a porn filmmaker. I was telling the women and the men both, the minute I see something that starts looking too sexy, I'm going to call cut, and we're not going to do it that way. So I think that was definitely something I achieved. My goal was not to make it erotic, and I think I may have fulfilled, done the job. Something I said I was going to do, I think I did. Once again, Mitch's score throughout these tableaus is just fantastic, and some of them were created, I think, before the film was he even saw it, because I had a click track on all of these, which gave Mitch something to work with. I had my original, I think Ghost Train by the Specials was the first, that was my click track, the Jerry Dammer song, Ghost Town. I thought that was the rhythm of what I was trying to do on the scene. So Mitch used that just as a click track, and of course did his own versions of it. Now these orgasms, these what we used to call wet shots, they were eliminated when it was released theatrically to art theaters. The porn theaters would have taken it, but as most people know, the film was pulled from all porn theaters because of the request by the audience. They they demanded their money back. They didn't want to see it, so it was a complete, failure on the adult market. But it later found success as a midnight movie, as most people know. But when you were making porn films back then, it was required. You had to show male orgasms for no. I never understood the point, but that was the rule. And of course, this is Paul McGivney as Nick, who was a stage actor. He didn't even really quite understand why I wanted him to be in a porn film, but he understood as the project went along, and that's Michelle Bauer. And the two vamps were both friends. And all the props, I went and personally picked out every prop and, the wardrobe with Belinda. And we wanted to go for that 50 vibe. The film's definition of the film was 50s meet, 90s at the time. That's Tommy Sheeter as Silky, who was the brother of a great writer, great comedy writer, who I met at Hustler. We both worked at Hustler for a number of years together, and I met Tommy. He was he worked in the circus, Barnum and Bailey at the time. And I said, Tommy, you ever done any acting? And he said, yeah. I said, come and read for me for this part. And of course, he was wonderful and a lovely guy. This shot was one I always liked because the idea, it's commonplace now, but you didn't often see actors framed like statues in the background of a scene. I mean, it's sort of popular in fashion later on, but it was pretty new then. I mean, it had been done, obviously, but you didn't see it too often. And I think this is Andy doing his Curly Howard impression. This guy actually shaved his head. When he first came onto the set, he had a full head of hair, and then on the first day of shooting, he shaved his head, and he said, what do you think? I go, yeah, once again, it's commonplace now, but back then, not too much. From the time I was 11 or 12 till I actually met Jerry, I was a sci-fi fanatic. I mean, I was raised on Theodore Sturgeon and Samuel Delany and Hyland and Sheckley. And Andy, we rehearsed together, he and I, for 5 or 6 days, 7 days together, going over the monologues. And he just loved the part. Actually, Richard Belzer was a friend, and he was an up-and-coming stand-up. And I thought maybe Richard could play the part, but scheduling conflict. I don't know if he ever would have eventually did it, but he showed up. He shows up in the film later on. When he does the reference to Dagwood and Blondie of Cafe Flesh, that's based on the really popular comic strip that I think is still in syndication. I believe so. And it was as popular a comic strip as there is by Chick Young, and then later his son Dean Young. It was the adventures of this couple, and the Dagwood sandwich became very popular. It was a mile-high sandwich. So I always liked the strip. And in fact, I used to talk to Dean Young through letters. So I gave a little reference to my favorite comic strip. It was also a movie series. And this is Mercedes Perez, her name is, a.k.a. Marie Sharp. She had never done an adult film either. She came to a casting. I used to do a lot of photography, Frank and I, at our studio, and she came for just to come and meet us for possible doing a girl set for one of the magazines, and wonderful young woman. And I asked her if she ever did any acting. She goes, oh no, I couldn't act. And I said, well, I think you might be able to do it. And she gave it everything she got, and she certainly looked the part, and she did well. And once again, she was really excited to be in it and didn't quite understand what it was about, but great, great team player. As was the entire cast, really. One thing about having all these cuts, it was just helpful for transition scenes too. There was nothing because I was basically we were shooting like at best 2-to-1 and sometimes less. And here's Andy, was doing some of his impressions. In the script, it actually said do Elvis. Yeah, so it was an okay Elvis. It worked. And of course, this was something, again, Paul built for me. Gave him the sketches. And at first, we had done a skyline like this in Night Dreams, which was a popular scene. We had done a desert scene, and we used the New York skyline in the back, made out of foam core. So then we were going to do it again with, I was always regurgitating ideas that worked because we had such limited budgets. But we wanted the oil wells, the little derricks, to move. So we just had little wires and little gears, battery operated, and it all worked. And of course, the pencil head, that was a concept I had for quite a while. I wanted the idea of suited men, like the residents with the tuxedos and the big eye. I always liked those images, so I said, yeah, the pencil would be a great metaphor, and it's phallic, so it works. And once again, the always started stylized, not, to get into the mood. And for a while, I actually thought, I had hoped that I could present the film with these scenes without the pornography and use the movie that you're watching as like a detailed storyboard for presentation, like a show reel, the whole movie, to remake it with a series, with a low budget still, but instead of $90,000, let's say $500,000, and expand it and be able to do more with it. And I actually did that. I had a lot of meetings and and everybody thought the look was terrific, but came close, like so many things, but we never got to go to the next step. So obviously it was released with the pornography intact, and it found its way into the world of midnight movies, which was a big success. A lot of the people that you see on the cutaways of the Cafe Flesh patrons, they were all scenesters in LA. A lot of every rock bands, art. In fact, when we had the premiere, premiere was sold out because so many people were in the film, came with their friends. So we had a fantastic premiere, and it was off and running and ended up breaking the house record at the New Art for the run, for financial, how much it made, which was completely unexpected. And Belinda made sure, every extra that was on was costumed and dressed. We had told people to come specifically with clothes that would fit into the. You walked into the studio, you saw the cafe. It was built. That could have been. We could have sold tickets and had a nightclub, but we also had a large wardrobe to dress everyone if we needed it. But almost the sex scenes, and many times they look like inserts, and they were just. A lot of people said it looked like they were just stripped into the film, and that's why sometimes I wonder if would a different approach worked better. But it's easy to say that 40 years later. This was 1982, and there really wasn't anything like this film then, and maybe in the history of pornography. There were similar films that were trying to do interesting things within the genre, but this was unique. And then you got to remember, the average porn film on 35 millimeter, when they call the golden age of porn, so let's say it ran 80 minutes. Well, of that 80 minutes, 70 minutes was going to be porn and 10 minutes would be narrative. Cafe Flesh is a 75-minute film, of which you're talking about, 55 minutes, 60 minutes is narrative. And you might have 15 or 16 minutes, 20 minutes of porn at best. So you could actually take out all the porn and have a wonderful short film in terms of the concept. You actually, because once again, pornography with me throughout everything I did was very secondary to, it was just something, it's how I was able to get budgets and have total creative freedom. I was spoiled early on in my career when I started at Hustler magazine, because I was 21 years old and I was given total creative freedom. So I kind of got it in my head. I didn't like to have too much interference. This is Paul, who I've mentioned quite a bit, the prop maker. I knew he had the right look. If not the acting chops, he certainly had the look. We shaved his hairline, and the bank vault, that was a good decision. Actually, that one was Paul's decision. That I originally had a different, I had a different door in mind. And Paul mentioned, we've done bank vaults before. How about we do a real big one? I said, yeah, that's even better. And of course, the bar, that was all paper mache behind it, which I knew how I wanted to light this. And Frank did a great job lighting it. And the woman inside the bar, holding with the tarantula on her hand, is later comes back in the film as a performer. This is actually the only scene in the movie that is outside of the cafe, which I have another one later, but it's in the same, it's supposed to be their apartment. It's really all done through light and shadows, and Frank did a wonderful job, as he did throughout the whole picture. And it was important. We had to get out of the cafe, but space was limited. Frank and I, our studio was 2,500 square feet, which is not a lot of room to shoot a 35 millimeter film, or even an 8 millimeter for me. It doesn't matter what format you were using. But we had a little corner of the space, and we just said we'll make it work through light and framing, and it turned out to work fine. And this is the first time you really see the idea of the film where, if they hug, they vomit. And of course, there's a lot of questions. Well, what about this? What about when do they touch? What if they brush each other? You have to throw that out the window and state the premise and just go with it. But when I wanted to remake it, you would have had an opportunity to really explore those elements and answer those questions. But in this 10 days, you didn't have a lot of time to go into those details. And of course, this is the first time you ever see her faking it, that she really isn't sick. You don't know it as you're watching it, but the film I really watched the most while prepping Cafe Flesh was Fosse's Cabaret. I mean, I thought, wow, it's the same formula, the stage and the storyline, stage and the storyline. Fosse went to musical numbers. Of course, I'm not comparing myself to Fosse. I'm just talking about structure, no other way. I was a huge Bob Fosse fan. Going back to when he was doing Pajama Game, and he was just a choreographer for MGM. Before he was ever a director, I was a big fan. But I did watch Cabaret quite a few times just to see how he went from the stage to the narrative. And there's no question that was an influence on the film. As was Guys and Dolls a little bit, actually, too, with a little bit of the lingo. The play, actually, more than Mankiewicz's film. And once again, another impression. This is Bela Lugosi. Of course, it was written in the script. The girls come out of the coffin and they're wearing flowers on their head, which I got. This is an idea I got. I had seen Peter Gabriel with Genesis in 1973, and he had done, in a performance, he had donned that exact headdress, and I always remembered it, and I said, I'm going to use that. Also on this scene, everybody, the fellow sitting on the bar and the bartender were both friends. Bobby Biggs, who was the little person, he had done a lot of work. The bartender had never done a film. Now, the man about to enter, he was my script supervisor's husband. He had made some films. Ruben Masters, her name was. She made quite a few interesting films herself. One called Smoker that's worth seeing if you ever have a chance. Now, he couldn't really act much, but he had the look. I mean, he required little to no makeup. So sometimes that's even more important in a film like this than their acting chops, because, that was the least important thing for me. And what you're hearing, the music, that was a synthesizer trumpet that Mitch somehow, I guess it had just come out. And he had found it, and he showed it to me. He said, what do you think of using this? And I said, yeah, the sound is fantastic. So that's a synth, actually. But it actually played like a trumpet, if I recall. I was very fortunate. I had hired a guy named Alec Hirschfeld, who was the camera operator, who was really a really good operator, because I was never happy with the camera operating on Night Dreams. And it was no fault, really. We didn't, Frank DP'd it, and if you ever got to ever see what it really looked like, one day maybe you will, the lighting is just stunning, but the operating wasn't as good as neither Frank or I wanted it. Frank did the operating, but he was really a DP much more than he was an operator. Oh, well, actually, this is in the cafe right next to the actual set, but it is a separate room, but it's still part of the cafe. And of course, this entire film was storyboarded. A person I previously mentioned, Mark Esposito, he did the storyboards. We did them together, and he had a comic background. His father was a longtime artist for Marvel. He was a really good director in his own right, and so we knew every shot was planned, because we had such limited time, such limited money. So, and because of my still background, every shot was composed just like a still set, just like a still shot. It's really the only way I knew. It's the only way I knew how to work. There was no coverage. That's Darcy Nichols, who, no relation to Andy, who was a actual porn performer going way back to like the Russ Meyer era.
You just seem to get better and better up there. I love watching.
And the woman talking, she was the one that was in the bar earlier on, sitting in the glass, behind the glass. And this is the first time you see a hint of the concept of Lana being a closeted positive. A few years back, during the height of COVID, there was a great article in the Huffington Post called "I Study Human Touch. I'm questioning what our future will be like after COVID-19," written by Epiphany Jordan, who was a guest writer. And the whole premise of her article was how Cafe Flesh, the world of Cafe Flesh was very much like the world of COVID. When you see this scene on the wall, the graffiti, which was written in the script when Jerry and I wrote it, I said, you see a wall, and on it is jump all over the wall and join the party, which was written on the Berlin Wall. And I remembered that I once did some research about graffiti on the Berlin Wall, and I remember reading that. And I said, let's put that on the wall in this film. And then when I framed it, I said, people are going to say they're trying to be arty. So I said, frame it so you don't see the P, and you just see the word arty. So for the detractors, I wanted them to know, we know. It's and an inside
Still
joke.
the pretty lovers wrangle. Max loves them, folks, for it is their very ignorance that makes them saintly. Your need flows on.
And you have to
folks.
keep in mind that this was at the end of the Cold War, and this is what the whole motif was. And Belinda, the costume designer, she did the flags on the panties, which I always liked. And the woman on the chain, she's popped up previously in my film Night Dreams. It's usually, people think Michelle Bauer was the woman in the hell scene in Night Dreams, attached, chained up, just like the scene here. But that was an actress named Tanya Turner, who I worked with a lot. She was also chained up in Night Dreams. We brought her back. And those were the panties I was talking about with the sickle, the Russian, stars and stripes. And Jerry wrote this monologue completely on his own, and I loved it. He's referencing a whole lot there. You need a lot of the signatures. I started putting in all my films, the barbed wire and the neon. Now the laughing you're hearing, that's actually Frank D'Elia, my partner. I don't remember being in the, when we were doing, I worked very hard, as I always do, on the sound. But Frank, for some reason, got it in his head. He thought some hideous laughter would really work. And he started laughing really loud. And of course, after hearing it, I said, let's keep that in. It's strangely, it's very irritating. One more thing to drive the customers out of the theater. The editing of the film was, like I said previously, it was all storyboarded, so it was shot to shot. But of course, with the sex scenes, you can't storyboard a sex scene unless it's a particularly specialty sequence. So we really utilized a lot of cutting, fast cutting, and I had a really good editor. He had never done a porn film before. He goes all the way back to the TV movies and sitcoms, and he was at Universal for about 20 years, and I met him. We became friends, and I said, would you edit my film for me? And he said, yeah, of course. And so he had a good time doing it. He said there wasn't anything to really edit. He said it was all there. And one of the beautiful things about shooting in a studio, you can really control the environment, and it's when the clock is ticking and you don't have a lot of money, it's a good way to stay on budget if you can make it work. And I don't know any other way to work, so by then I was already made the decision I would never shoot on location. Coming up with the original concept, it was the early AIDS, and it was my sci-fi background. And of course, when I met Jerry, he looked at all my sci-fi books, a huge collection, first editions. I mean, I was very proud of my sci-fi collection. He goes, Stephen, why are you reading all this? When are you going to start reading some real literature? Put away your comic books. When I conceived of the film with Jerry, when we came up with it together, I said visually it has to be the 50s because the 50s was when the nuclear scare was. That's the duck and cover period where everybody who went to grammar school learned how to, if you heard the sirens go, you got under your desk and that was going to save you from a nuclear bomb. Yeah, the sirens and the soundscape and all of it, that was all conceived almost before we actually filmed it. I had it in mind what the background was going to sound like. So it was all kind of pre-planned. This boom up should have been faster. It always bothered me that it took this long. I would have liked to have done it faster. Specifically, the way she turned around would have been a much better if she had suddenly done a very, I mean, and this is a sequence that I actually was very happy with in the film. Maybe one of the best sections of the film. That's Belinda, my ex-wife, as the enforcer and who did all the costumes. This was an actor named Robert Dennis. I saw him in a play, and I hired him after seeing him in a play. He later starred in a Ramones video that Frank had done. And like we already introduced her a few times before.
And you mix drinks, right? And you do good work, and you like your job, and you'd like to keep...
And I told Joey, no reaction, just keep nodding your head.
So you wouldn't mind my asking a couple of questions? Like, you got a mom's here? Where is she?
What's happening?
It's just the enforcers flushing out sex positives who aren't performing.
I better go tell Moms.
And the way I shot the film, I did all the sex scenes, the tableaus first. And then we did the rest of the movie. And this scene was the first scene we shot. By the way, the woman who just passed, the black woman with the sunglasses, she was the actress that played the tongue in my film Dr. Caligari, Behind the Wall. Her name was Tequila Mockingbird.
You know, you look better in the flesh than you did in your 8x10s. And it looks like...
There used to be a company called On TV that was an early cable specialty station, and they were looking for original content, and they were interested in Cafe Flesh after it broke as a cult movie and got a lot of good reviews. And Jerry and I were intending on turning it into a television series. And when we had in mind for the first pilot episode, we were going to start with a flushing, the enforcers coming in and flushing out positives. I was always happy with this whole sequence here. Kitten with a Whip, of course, was the Anne Margaret movie, 1965. Great early Margaret film. One of the many references is in the film. This was a very hard shot to do. The weight, I had her on a platform on the bottom so Belinda could lift her up and do it all in one shot. For a little film, it was an intricate sequence. Now later in the pilot, when he says we have to go help that girl, that's when you go outside of the cafe and you see the universe post-apocalyptic, and you see how they groom the positives.
It's her duty to perform. I mean, nobody wanted to be in this world.
I love Mitch's sequence here. His music is always... In the creation of Cafe Flesh, Zappa wasn't too far from my mind. Not Jerry's when it came to the dialogue, but the visuals. And of course, years later, he called me and we actually did collaborate and work together. And it was...
The June Taylor of the nuclear set.
That line in the original run at the midnight showings always got the biggest laugh in the movie, and that's because June Taylor was a when she said, I'm June Taylor of the Nuclear. So June Taylor was a choreographer who was worked with Jackie Gleason on his variety show for a dozen or so years. And she had a specific dance style, kind of a ersatz Busby Berkeley. And everybody knew the name from my generation, and it always got a big laugh. And nowadays, when it screens, you assume nobody knows who June Taylor is.
Been a long night.
Oh, Moms, do you mind if I stay behind a while in your office? I'd like to wait for Nick and Silky to come back.
Sure, baby. Just
And all the birds were mine from my own collection. I love ornithology, and these were all my own personal birds from my collection. And it was also Psycho. It was a tribute to the Norman Bates motel scene. Now this was actually a difficult shot because it was pretty detailed for. We had limited time and we had to make the move, but it worked out well. I found those chairs. I remember going to a really obscure prop house. And I saw two, and I said, do you have any more? He said, we got a lot of them. And that really, really helped me. And of course, Mitch's music here is particularly nice. And he scored this to picture. This was written to picture. A lot of the other music wasn't necessarily scored to picture. And there's a dolly zoom into the window. I wanted to get in the window, but I don't like zoom, so we just buried the zoom. The zoom is starting now to get through the window. Push in, and then we zoom so we could get to the close-up. She's revealing herself to be a positive. And I like what Mitch did here, too. As she slides down the wall, he punctuated it really nicely. And you see the ring on her hand indicating she and Nick were married. And then we moved. Now this shot, before I actually shot this, I said, that floor is really dirty. I really should clean it up. But everybody said, no, it works. It's post-nuclear. It's always kind of, the art director in me wasn't entirely happy with the floor, but I guess it's pretty irrelevant. And of course, all that stuff was all the sweet Bernstein, Sweet Smell of Success, Bernstein, the man with the golden arm. Mitch, that was the click tracks that I was using for a lot of this stuff.
Oh, you missed it, Briggsy. Remember that cute twist angel? Last night they came and got her. Forces hauled her off for holding out on the honey.
Sex positive, huh? I thought she looked a little juiced.
Virgin stuff from what I hear.
And these are the two vamps, which they really function as great props. If I ever had to fill a little space or something, but it was in the storyboard. Drawn this, and here's the Belzer scene. Richard was having trouble memorizing the speech, so I had to put it on cue cards. And you can see why I had to frame it like this, which is, I would have framed it a little bit different, but he had to read the cue cards. You could see he's looking off camera a little bit. And that's Harley, his wife, longtime wife till they were married. She was in a movie, Lady Chatterley's Lover, that was made, I think, in England in the late 70s. She did a few films. Now, Randy insisted to dress this way. I said, Andy, what are you doing? He goes, I didn't ask for nothing. I want to wear street clothes on this because I want to do Brando later on. So I don't know why I let him, because it looks like he forgot to put on his costume. But Maybe it's just me, but I always thought, why are you dressed this way? Sometimes you have to give in. This is his Brando. I couldn't have been happier with his performance. You know, obviously it was a non-union film. You have very few. You're very limited on, and then you're mixing hardcore pornography with actors. It wasn't done very often, if ever. I don't know if you know who Andy is doing right here, but it's my favorite actor from the golden age of Hollywood, which is Burt Lancaster. I love Burt, especially his performance as J.J. Hunsaker in The Sweet Smell of Success. Here's this big bopper, who died. He had a song called Chantilly Lace, and that's how it started. He died along with Buddy Holly and Richie Valens. This is the bandwagon again. Another scene which I was very happy with the lighting and the whole design of this Art Deco scene. That's the bandwagon where you saw the arms with Ann Miller dancing. And you saw the violins coming up from the floor. I said, I'm going to do the low-budget version of that. So I actually had the people under there cut holes and decided to do everything black and white. It's in the script. It says she's writhing in a phone booth. And Belinda made the costumes all black and white and the phone motif, which I always thought would work because of the phone booth on the floor. You got to have the guys wearing phones on their head. Very simple set, vinyl, foam core, a couple of rented phone booths, small phone booths, and arms, and you've got a nice set. It shows you how simple you can do something with a little bit of ingenuity. And then, of course, no foreplay, nothing. You just go to the close-up. And the whole film had torch lighting. In fact, we lit a lot of the scenes just by those torches you see. I used Fuji 250, which at the time was the fastest film available. In fact, I think we were the first people, if I remember the Fuji salesman saying, yes, this Fuji film, this high speed, I don't think any feature had ever been done with it. I think we were the first. We tested it, and we really liked it. And Frank decided, yeah, let's go with it. And we couldn't have been happier. We saved a lot of money. And I never used short ends on anything the way the old days, low budget, everybody used what they called short ends, which were not full reels, but I never did that. And this is like a still shot I would have done. So never stopped using my still background. My philosophy is if you couldn't stop the film and be able to see a photograph, then I wasn't doing my job. And which is interesting on this film, which a lot of fans have pointed out, Rob Zombie, he sampled the opening of the breathing. The woman breathing through all this is the same woman who read the introduction. She did all of the moans and groans. And Rob Zombie did a song called More Than Human, and he sampled it. And I later found out he was a fan of the film. I'm not sure if Mitch ever got a royalty for that. I never have asked him. And of course, the soundtrack was released last year. It had previously been released. After the movie came out, it was released as under the name Key of Cool, and then it had a sticker from the original soundtrack, Cafe Flesh. And then just last year, or 2 years ago maybe, it was released on vinyl again. Nice pressing. Mitch always owned the music anytime he worked with me on all my projects, so we did a lot of projects together. I always said, we're not buying the rights, I'm leasing the rights from you, even though he did the the music specifically for my film.
What was Max getting at?
Now here's something that
What's with this beat positive bit?
this narrative might be off, because she comes back and tells Nick and Lana, as you're about to hear,
Why I've been holding back for so long. I mean, sex is
that she
great.
really enjoys the sex.
I can't wait to do it with a woman, with another man. I want to do it.
And yet, the premise of the film is the positives are forced to do it, and the reason the sex is boring is because it's a routine to him. So did I make a mistake? And then I said, well, it's new. Give her another 2 or 3 months, and she'd be just as boring as, she'd be just as nonplussed as the veteran positives.
Would you come with me, please? Would you come?
Of course.
Also the humor factor of like, the only line I should have put in, Jerry and I should have said, I can't wait to call Mom and tell her. That was the line I really wanted. Interesting thing here, I originally was, of course, obviously wanted to turn around and get a close-up of Bosco, named after my favorite chocolate syrup as a child. And time. This was shot on the very last day of this sequence, and that clock was ticking, and I had to finish the film. So when it was time for his close-up, I never did reversals or coverage, but I did have a shot plan for him. Couldn't do it. I don't think it matters ultimately, but
She's in good hands.
Max, you've been getting on my nerves.
put false eyelashes on Andy for this.
Sick 'em, baby doll.
Get away from me. Get away from me.
This sequence where the positives are attacking the negatives, I had a scene earlier on where I had it was almost like a rape scene to Nick with the positives. Going after him just for folly, just for fun, to tease him, and he's getting violently ill. But when it came to shooting the film, I just didn't have the time for it. Which was the same thing with a lot of things in the film.
I've talked to you about this before. You're in serious trouble now. You know what's next.
Hey,
Now this exchange between the two, they improvised this a little bit during rehearsals. They played around with it.
Recite the poem.
come on, what are you getting so excited about? I'm just having a little fun.
Don't make me ask you again.
Listen to me, all my friends are here. I'm not reciting nothing. You want to go in your office, we'll talk about this. You want to keep an MC, I'll walk, okay?
Heel.
I'm not going to do it. Forget about it, okay? We'll go into your office and we can talk about this,
Heel.
man to man.
Yeah, this was on the last day. I remember the sequence, even 40 years later, that I didn't think I was going to make it. We were either going to run out of film or run out of time.
But under my boxers, nothing
I think we only used about 30,000. I think we shot 30,000 feet of film, and no less, 20,000 maybe, and 7,500 was used.
because I lost my weapon in World War III.
And of course, all these laughter, that was, all off of library laughter, sound effects library I had myself. I had quite a good...
Finally, I've got him in mind.
Young Mitchum, of course, obviously refers to Bob Mitchum, Robert Mitchum, the great actor. Once again, nowadays, what's young Mitchum mean? And of course, Rock Hudson, Tab Hunter, and Fabian. Once again, maybe Rock Hudson's remembered, but Tab Hunter and Fabian, I'm not quite sure.
Lana.
Press the panic button.
Although Tab Hunter ended up showing up in a John Waters film a few years later.
Bore myself. All I can think
Right at the same time, Polyester, that this was made.
trying not to show it, but she's gone nuts over the guy.
For Christ's sake, Nick. Man, you used to be lightning around this scene. Now you're strictly the plague.
This is an actor named Don DeBastone. I saw him in a play with Paul. They were doing a play. I went to, I used to go to a lot of theater, and I saw him in a theater and told them both that I had something that I think it might work for them. They read the script, and they both understood it to a certain degree.
Doing a double flip over Little Angel.
And I told the makeup artist, show some radiation scarring.
Believe me, I tried.
Don't start that with me, man.
And I thought Mitch did a wonderful job in the background with the acoustic
Twists
piano.
out of the cafe can't deal with it.
We're not here to talk about my problems, huh?
Well, the thing is, it's getting worse. I got this fat chump Max on my case, and now Moms is defending me like I can't protect myself.
It's so funny. This man was in love with Michelle Bauer. He had a crush, and he was so excited to. As the time went on, he was really excited to be part of the film, and he said to me, "Stephen, can I watch the tableaus?" I said, "No, I wish I could let you see the tableaus, but it doesn't work that way." And he said he was so disappointed that he couldn't have been on set because he was gaga over Michelle.
At the cafe all day. Everybody's so jacked up about Johnny Rico.
You know, a light bulb, a flat, a door, and you have a set.
Come on, Nick. He's so famous.
Gonna be at the show tonight, Nick?
Sure, Spike. Wouldn't miss it for the world.
Well, kind of exciting, huh? Hey, not too pathetic that the biggest night of your life is watching some
Okay, so here we're coming to the third and final act.
you don't even know. Just kidding, folks. This Rico
Palooka,
is a specimen.
slang for a boxer. Also Joe Palooka of the Bubblegum. Joe Palooka of the old movie series about the pugilist.
He's all right. I know you don't want to look at my gorgeous.
I took that line directly from The Godfather too, when Pantangeli comes to the congressional hearings, and he says, "This place looks more crowded than a ball game." I said I'm going to use that.
Am I right, Lana? Who can tell what a real man can bring out in a crowd? A real woman, perhaps? We'll just have to wait and see.
Now this tableau here, this was the first scene I shot when we made the film. We shot 4 tableaus, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then took a break and then shot all the narrative around it, the non-tableaus. And once this soundtrack was directly inspired by The Man with the Golden Arm by Elmer Bernstein. I cut it to The Man with the Golden Arm, and then Mitch listened to the click track and once again created this score. Now, Kevin James, the actor who played Johnny Rico, he was an interesting guy. He was a farm boy from Iowa, I think. Could not be a nicer guy. I mean, he called me Mr. Sayedi on Night Dreams until I said, you know, you don't have to do that. I think we were the same age. And I said, he played 3 or 4 parts on Night Dreams. and always kind of masked, as all my male actors. Anytime I had a chance to hide the man's face somewhere and let the women be dominant, that was a formula I did. I really worked for me. And the scene with the pillbox hat with Jackie, that was not a random choice. I love bullet hair dryers from the late 50s, early 60s. And the pillbox hat on the cover of that magazine was also, I used to collect pillbox hats. So that was purposeful. But Kevin was very, very dependable. You said action and he was ready. He never had a single line in any film I ever did, but he loved doing my work and was always was a big supporter of my stuff, and always ready to do anything I needed him to do, which was sex. One thing you really have to keep in mind, if you're watching this today, you're 25 or 24, I don't think you could really understand how radical this actually was. And you have to always remember, this was financing. I was given the money, and it was financed by a porn company. While they were financing Cafe Flesh, they were doing Hot and Saucy Pizza Girls, and they had done Johnny Wad with all the Johnny Wads with John Holmes. It wasn't. I wasn't getting any financing from people interested in art films or genre films. This was pretty chancy, and of course, the end result was, as soon as they saw it, and when it was told that they wouldn't play at any of the porn films, they sold it to another company. And of course, the main person who was with this company, who was the CEO of Hustler, one of the reasons I had this kind of freedom was because the CEO of Hustler always told the other people who were putting up the money, is he made us a lot of money for the magazine, so we have to let him do his thing. And I told this man, when they were selling Cafe Flush, they said, don't sell your interest in it. He had 30%. I said, do not sell your interest. It may not make money now, but down the road it will make money. And of course, he always said he regretted selling it. And Mitch, once he got into this kind of groove, I would say, Mitch, just hang on this groove, because we can tell the story just through your music and some visuals here. So he always gave me more than I needed. And we had a manicurist on the set for all the women's nails. That was always important to me. Small details, but worth it when you're doing close-ups of hands, obviously. I mean, could he be any less interested? I mean, and that's exactly what I told him to do. They're just following my instructions, for better or worse. And Marie here, she had never made an adult film, like I said, so she had no idea why I was telling her, do not be sexy. What do I think about, Stephen? I think that your dog just died, your favorite pet. Keep that in your mind. Action. Yeah, I'm thinking back on it now. Yeah, this was the first. This was the first exposed film. This sequence, not these sequences. These came later, but just the tableau. This was all storyboarded in advance, how I was going to do this. Shot this at 96 frames. It was all, pre-planned. We didn't even do a rehearsal on it. There was nothing, you didn't need a rehearsal. And of course, obviously, I didn't have monitors, You had to trust the operator. And those faces ended up being on the one sheet, the 3 masked men. This woman right there in the headband, she was Ruben Masters, the director, and who was my script supervisor. She wanted a cameo, and so, yeah, jump in the line, jump in the conga line. And this guy with the shaved head told me he was going to do some sort of voodoo signs or something with his fingers. I don't know what he was talking about. Yeah, do it. Even this look, when they look at each other, I said, just make sure you guys look at each other. And when this music cue changes, I really believe, I'm actually really happy with this music cue because it's so damn intense. And for a porno, what was financed by porno people, how in the world, can you turn this in? It's so bleak. And of course, that was what it was supposed to be. That was the intention. Now, Michelle Bauer, this is interesting seeing, and everybody has asked over the years, did you use an insert? Because she wasn't known as a pornographic actress. This was, of course, before she was a scream queen. But she had done one adult film under the name Pia Snow. It was I forget the name of the film. I'm not a historian by any means. I don't know my porn background, the name of films, but she had done one. And she said to me, Stephen, I will do girl, girl, but you will have to use an insertion. You have to use somebody, insert to a stunt double for the penetration, which I did, and we'll point it out here as we're watching. Now this is her. There's no one else here. Yeah, so that she had no problem with. And I don't think Marie had ever done a girl-girl scene. Maybe in her private life, but certainly not on a film. And Mitch's soundtrack it's just so rich here. When we were doing the restoration, we were using a print, one of the the finest print available anywhere was in the UCLA Film Archives. And when we went to look at the scenes, this sequence here was taken out. It was omitted, and someone actually went in and cut it out. Maybe they must have liked the scene or the women, I'm not sure, but it was took scissors and someone took it home. So we had to find another print, of which, as far as we know, there's only 2 left. And that was at Kinsey Institute, which were very much involved in the restoration. And we used the Kinsey print. Thank God that scene was intact. And we used the missing film and filled it, the UCLA print, with the Kinsey print. When the film was released theatrically, once in a while there were scenes that were snipped. Even on the, I remember some of the release prints came back snipped, if I'm not mistaken. And this sound is just unrelenting, doesn't stop. The woman who was in anguish and took her hand and from her forehead down through her face, over her face, she was a French friend of mine that I had met in Los Angeles. Her husband opened the first rap club. In fact, you can really say he brought rap to Los Angeles as a promoter. And I mean, the earliest gigs by Ice-T, and a lot of the earliest rap stars. He was responsible. I used to go to the club just because I was friends with the husband and wife, and he really was he was the impresario of rap for Los Angeles, and the club was open for quite a. I don't remember the name. I originally had 2 different endings for the film, neither of which made it. The scene where Spike is dragging Nick out of the club, this was supposed to stay in, just as it is. And in the final version, you never see either of them again. However, in the script, the original draft, Nick appears at the end of the film during this sequence, and he shows up on stage before this close-up, he comes on stage and you see blood running down his pants, and she looks close up and he's got his penis cut off and it's bleeding, and he hands it to her, and they continue having sex. Jack and the other people who finance it said, "Stephen, you can't do that." So then Jerry and I went back, and then we decided, well, Nick could hang himself from the rafters. You don't see him, and then the next time you see him, you see his body come down, he's hung himself, he's swinging, and they continue making love while you see his body swinging back and forth. They wouldn't have that. So what was I supposed to do? I ended on the freeze frame. But I fought as hard as I could for it, but no such luck. I couldn't do it. So what do? I even thought, well, let's just shoot it and we'll have it. And I think I should have done that, because 40 years later it would have worked perfectly. But now that I own the film, so we could have done that. Cafe Flesh had a lot of fans from unexpected places, and the one that made me happiest was finding out that Hunter S. Thompson was a huge fan of the film. A distributor had looked at Cafe Flesh, and he was talking about the movie, and he said, one of my closest friends is Hunter, and he's the biggest fan of this film. And he openly, you can find references. I've tried to look up some of the references, and I found a few, but there's one article that I remember reading where they said Hunter was invited to speak at a college, and there was a particular topic that he was supposed to speak on, and it was advertised as Hunter Thompson speaking on this subject, which is, I'm drawing a blank, but the point of the article was all he would do was talk about this film called Cafe Flesh, and he instead of talking about what he was supposed to.